Yes, so hi everybody. Thank you for staying here, and I realize I'm the one in between yourself and lunch, so since we're running late, my presentation will be very short, very practical, promise that. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about mobile billing, just to get you a sense of what's going on in the world of mobile billing of mobile apps. And first of all, I just wanted to share you a high-level view of what are the mobile app markets looking like today. So you look at the two pies, and one really striking data point here is how big mobile app market is becoming. If you look at year 2016, which is just a couple years from now, a mobile application market is going to be $50 billion a year. Just to give you a perspective of that number, all of music industry, like the entire music industry with all rock stars, with labels, records, etc., is worth $25 billion a year. So we are looking at the industry which is twice as big as the whole of music industry. What's really striking, all of that industry is really one created in just a few years. So it's a massive growth. Apparently companies that participate in that pie are building that value are going to massively benefit from that. And another interesting data that you will find on those pies is how the structure of the revenue is changing fundamentally. So how many of you actually are involved with mobile apps, just out of curiosity? Okay, that's like half. But a couple of years ago, the industry was discussing what they call the problem of 99 cents. That means that's the least possible price you can charge in the App Store. So the problem was that every developer was highly incentivized to price their application lower than anybody else just to get to the top charts. And everybody was essentially converging to the $1 price point, because otherwise you don't sell anything, because somebody else will sell it at $1. And the industry was debating, really, if everything is priced at $1, and it's very hard to justify any investment with that low kind of revenue, so isn't the whole industry going to collapse? Just because we're not going to make enough money at all to justify the investment in the projects, because if you sell your application or game at $1, you're just never going to get enough return on your investment to justify the investment in the first instance. And that was like a real issue. So if you read the TechCrunches or VentureBeats or other tech blogs on mobile apps 3 years ago, it would say, hey, the industry is going to collapse because nobody is going to sustain a $1 price point, but you cannot do anything else. So that was the case when the dominant business model was paid applications. So again, if you look at the blue pie, you will see that the majority, a couple of years ago, the majority of application revenue really was coming from paid applications. So really as simple as selling your game or application at like 99 cents or $2 or $3, and that was 80% of the whole revenue. And what we are definitely seeing now in the industry, the composition of the revenue is changing dramatically. Yes. So if you look at the green pie, you see that paid applications are decreasing in size, although not as dramatically as it really we see happening in life. And the growing areas are virtual goods, and I call them freemium or in-application billing, IAP, or virtual goods, they are all the same nature. And apparently advertising is growing at the expense of paid applications. Moreover, again, from what we see in the industry, I would actually go one step over by stating that all major developers that at least we see at GetJar are actually shifting away completely from a paid model. So definitely the future is behind in-application billing and freemium models. And I will explain a couple of the other points slightly later in this presentation. Just for now, just to illustrate that the pie is huge. It's growing at the enormous pace. The next couple of years is going to create another, say, equivalent of music industry in terms of value. And the distribution of revenue is changing dramatically. So right now, it's the right time to really think, decide, research, and select the right business model if you want to make money from mobile applications. Another debate, again, the first pie was actually referring to mobile in general, and that was Gartner research. But there has also been an ongoing debate, and a couple of years ago, another debate you would find on the pages of VentureBeats and TechCrunches is apps versus native, apps versus web. So is it mobile web that is going to take over? Because it's open, it's free, you don't have to pay all the App Store taxes, etc., etc., or is it really mobile applications? And a couple of years ago, it was extremely unclear which one will win, to the extent that if you look at the Facebook strategy, that's been like the one single biggest ever Facebook failure, is that Mark has bet his company on mobile web, and that failed. So again, if you Google his quotes a year ago, approximately, he said, "Hey, no, it looks like mobile is moving into apps as opposed to mobile web, and that has been, one of the wrong decisions that Facebook did is completely betting on the mobile web future." So this is the research that actually is suggesting that if you look at the mobile consumption and usage, that 80% of the usage is in fact mobile applications versus only 20% being mobile web. So basically a safe assumption to make is that if you look at the first slide, basically the revenue behind mobile applications and try to allocate that to web versus apps, very easy to see that the vast majority of that revenue is actually going into apps as opposed to mobile web. So therefore, again, if you're creating a strategy for your company, for your product, for your mobile application, it's a safe assumption that a heavy focus has to be really on apps as opposed to mobile web, simply because the user prefers great user experience. And right now it's safe to say that the users have learned what App Store model is, and that the user behavior for mobile is primarily apps as opposed to web, which is on the desktop. And now basically a couple of insights. I think there are pretty major changes in the industry. And first of all, I already mentioned that paid model is being massively replaced to in-application purchases. Just to give you some real data points. Again, at GetJar, we definitely see what's happening inside the applications. We can follow every user, every purchase in every app that we have. And this is data on 250 million users. So definitely we see where they spend time, where they spend money. And the one major trend is we've been actually surprised, completely shocked how fast in-application purchases are growing. So behind you see a couple of screenshots. The most successful games today are Candy Crush Saga, Clash of Clans. And all of those games have been fair successes, very massive successes, specifically on the back of in-application purchases. Now, another interesting phenomena is the pattern of spend. So again, if one parameter data point that we use to compare successful or less successful business models is what we call RPM, or revenue per 1,000 users. That means, on average, if you have 1,000 users to your game application, how much money you can make. So if you look at usual casual games that are sold, say, $1 to $3, a typical RPM that we've observed across tens and of top applications is around $5 to $10. Now, if you look at the successful games like Clash of Clans and the Candy Crush Saga, with in-application purchases, we are able to get $1,600 RPMs. So $10, $1,600. You can calculate the difference. So we're not talking about like 10, 20, 50%. We're talking about a massive increase in being able to monetize the user if really you can adopt and use a successful in-application business model. Again, probably more familiar companies for you is companies like Game Insight and similar. And those companies with those kind of games are able to achieve $600 to $800 RPMs. So again, $10, $800. Only if you switch to in-application purchase as opposed to paid, and you are successful at optimizing in-application purchases. Another interesting data point is apparently it takes a lot of patience, a lot of work to implement a successful in-application billing model, because you have to measure basically every step where the user does, what he does, ton of A/B testing, and what we observe. Just a data point for you that for successful game developers, again, like Game Insight, like Candy Crush Saga, like Supercell with Clash of Clans, the analytical team, basically the guys that measure every single step, is becoming as big as a development team. So you have a development team of 50 guys, another 50 guys basically are carefully measuring what's going on with the application, tracing every single step, optimizing ton of A/B testing. But the reward that you get for doing that is that you're able to achieve a massively better monetization. And again, I don't have to tell you how strong economically you become if you have a successful business model. Well, basically, again, if you look at the top successful application, they're all hundreds of millions users bases are built on the back of marketing of virality. That's a very important point. So basically, again, if you look at those guys, they are spending millions of dollars a day on user acquisition. And apparently, user acquisition through marketing channels is an extremely competitive thing. So unless you're able to, on average, draw high value from your user, apparently you cannot afford paying high bids in those marketing channels, and therefore you cannot simply scale. So once again, just to reiterate those points, most successful business models are today with in-application purchases as opposed to paid. It takes a ton of patience, attention, and work to make the business model work correctly. The benefit you get is that once you are successful, once you are in that, say, RPM range, you can afford marketing, and that marketing becomes profitable to you. So every user you pay for, say, $1 to $3 is returning back as multiple of that. And this is how you scale, because recently being able to scale just organically became an extremely difficult part. So marketing is the only reliable way. Another phenomenon which we see apparently that the distribution of that revenue time-wise is becoming longer and longer. So if before basically you invest like $1 into buying a user and then you can get this $1 back in next week, right now again those schemes of how you monetize the users become so sophisticated that actually we are tracing a full 6 months performance and behavior of the user. And essentially many schemes imply that essentially first month you don't even ask the user to pay or don't offer to pay for anything, just to get the user hooked onto the game. And you can actually start monetizing very gradually, starting with 1 month and 2. So the whole cycle, like really how to get the user, get him to use the game or the application and get him a taste of blood and then start offering him cheap things and then more expensive things. That whole cycle becomes longer and longer. And right now, it's actually average of 2 to 3 months. So be prepared to invest in marketing way ahead of before you make your money. That's just a reality. Another interesting data point is price points. So again, coming back to this 99-cent problem with paid applications a couple years ago, right now, you will be surprised if I mention, well, apparently we process a ton of transactions inside because we possess a virtual currency. And that virtual currency actually, for all game developers that we support, makes half of the revenue. So basically, we have visibility into half of the revenue of all the top guys. And then what we are surprised completely is that the pricing point actually have moved significantly up. So again, one data point I will mention that if you analyze all revenue and take purchases less than $3, then sub $3 purchases will be only 10% of the all revenue combined. So the most popular price points around $10, $20. And actually, what we've been also completely shocked to see is that for every single game that we observe, there is a segment of what we call super users. That's an extremely tiny segment, being sometimes less than 1%, but their spending ability is endless. So for those games, you have clubs of users spending like $50,000 a year on a game and more. So those we call super users. And then those users becomes like extremely valuable. Basically, they generate sometimes up to 80% of all your revenue, just on the back of 1% of users. So, well, apparently we have to develop our strategy to keep, maintain, defend those users. For example, very often, the data on who those users are who are spending like $50,000 on Farmville is extremely valuable. So, ad networks protect that. Those game developers apparently don't want to display any ads at all. And this is an interesting phenomenon to keep in mind. This is something we never thought would exist, and definitely we never saw a couple years ago. And another, again, interesting phenomenon in the industry is apparently the choice of platform and monetization per platform. So, well, my personal opinion, and a lot of developers I see sharing that opinion, is that despite iOS being right now the default standard for, say, a game or app developer, and then still, even though in terms of absolute number of users, iOS is much smaller now than Android, but because the monetization on average is 5 times higher on iOS, still it is a #1 choice for a lot of developers. So basically they say, hey, Android is twice as big, but on average per user, we're making 5 times as much on iOS. Therefore, the balance is definitely on the iOS side, at least for the nearest visible future. And on the other hand, yes, this is the case right now, but from what we see happening with Android, there are 2 major trends. One is if you take a look at the iOS market share, it's becoming flat and actually starts to fall a little bit, and Android is on the very rapid increase. So if you just extrapolate the numbers next couple of years, and you see Android becoming much bigger. And the other interesting thing is we definitely see the gap between Android and iOS being closer and closer and smaller and smaller. So this is, by the way, one of the things that our product really helps developers on Android to close, is we provide virtual currency that allows you to essentially double your revenue per user, and that brings you closer the user value on Android to iOS user. And for many developers, many top developers, definitely you've heard the names, we actually see them being able to make the same money on the Android user as we do on the iOS user, using the combination of in-app purchases, virtual currency, offer wall advertising. So basically, my message is already today, if you really work on that, it is possible to lift the value and the price of the Android user up to the iOS level. Definitely that's the future. And apparently billing is very difficult in Android. So this is still, I would name it as a problem #1 in the whole industry, because definitely is a multi-billion dollar opportunity. We see a ton of approaches. There unfortunately is not like one single good solution. Unlike iOS, Google is taking a little bit more open approach to payments. So if you are a gaming developer, well, it is very likely that you will use Google Checkout or some other payments in the developed part of the world, but you will switch to SMS billing or some local billing platforms, even though it's against Google Terms of Services. But no, apparently they realize that they have to allow you to make money. So what we observe is that despite being against the terms of service, a lot of alternative billing platforms are being used. And then that's basically a challenge. But again, my message is that solving that challenge really allows you to tap into extremely high user values on the Android. So yeah, as I promised, it's very fast, very practical, and well, I'm on LinkedIn, Gidger, and Facebook. So if you have any specific questions, please feel free to contact me. Otherwise, thank you and see you online. Thank you.